Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible.
Hello and welcome everyone to this episode of the Life and Happiness Podcast run by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Steven Solorzano, and let's get into this one. How are y'all doing this week? There has been some more interesting news going on. All-Star Game shenanigans. I think they're a little bit overblown, but we'll see what happens. What else? Falcon and the Winter Soldier are continuing on Disney Plus, and the last episode, though enjoyable, was my least favorite of the three so far. I'm curious where the mystery will go, and I won't spoil, but it's something enjoyable. And King Kong and Godzilla had their grudge match. I think I may have talked about that last episode. I rewatched it again, and it is a good time. Good brawls. I highly recommend. And other than that, any big stories? Some that I can think of, but I'm not sure if necessarily should talk about them here today. So let's get into the subject matter then. What's the question of the day? And for you all, I have, when do you become an adult? Is it just an age thing? Is it, you're 18 and you're an adult? Or is it an experience thing? Is it something you need to do? Is something how do you do it? Do you need to choose to become an adult? Because the theme of today is gonna be about balance, moderation, kind of having, because you need aspects of certain things, but whenever you go overboard into whatever it may be, it tends to turn into a bad thing. And we'll go into the different variations of this. And a big reason why I thought about that is the last segment today is going to be 7 reasons why you should keep the kid inside of you alive. Because growing up, a lot of things that I would see is people my own age and back then, so like kids like me, and even now that I'm a college student, that kind of age, where you see people like me but dead inside. That's the way I would put it, where the spirit inside of them has kind of faded and they're just kind of whining and complaining about everything, and everything's kind of painful. And I would also see it in adults, and lots of adults growing up. You see it when it happens to a couple, and then the kind of everything magical about it little fades away. You see what people have it with their careers, and then it's just kind of gets stale and boring. And I guess what I would say, here's how I think the best way to describe it. It's like part of becoming an adult is being responsible, taking on more responsibility and getting serious about certain aspects of life, being able to be independent and take care of yourself, to create order. That's what it is. To be able to create order and keep it that way. But a problem that comes with it is if things become too much order, too routine-like I've mentioned before, if there's no recreation of the magic that was there, no rekindling the fire, then it corrupts and decays and becomes old and withered and sucks the life out of everything. Literally, it's it's something which poisons people's minds once they get bored of what they're doing, because then they know they're no longer growing. I've mentioned this kind of idea. But the reason why I phrase it that way is how do you become an adult, and the reason why this episode's theme is going to be balance is because there's also the opposite. And the opposite is you never grow up. You never accept responsibility. Everything is pleasure-seeking all the time. And all about you a lot of the time, too. And those are the kids that never grow up. Those are a lot of college students, by the way. And there are a lot of... and you know when you meet a 50-year-old child and they're like this. It's something... Even though you may not put it in words that way or realize that's what it is, you recognize it when it's around you. And, well, it's not good to have 80-year-old children, 40-year-old children, whatever, because that means you don't have someone that can really stand up to the challenge, rise up to the occasion. A big part of like a lot of what people discuss when it's like when you transition from being a boy to a man or from a girl to a woman is that being able to take on more challenges than you would before. That's why, like, when you have younger kids and they ask to do certain things, we say no until they get to a certain point when we feel that they're mature enough, well-adjusted enough to be able to actually take on those certain responsibilities, right? Like, what's a good example of that? I guess what comes to mind is, like, driving, actually. That's a big one, because one, you need to develop the motor skills and awareness, but a big part of it is kind of like the responsibility of, like, when you're in the car and you're driving other people, you're responsible for making sure everyone's okay, so you got to be kind of a little bit more serious about it on the road. And, well, if you have a kid that's doesn't really pay attention to anything and can't really stay focused, then am I going to give him the responsibility, teach him how to actually drive a car? No, he has to be ready for that kind of thing. And sometimes you don't know if you're ready. Sometimes you have to choose to become ready. Like, it's not that all of a sudden you're ready now. No, it's like, I'm going to focus and learn how to take on this responsibility. Kind of like learning on the job kind of thing. So, I want to contrast what it means to be a kid versus what it means to be an adult so that, we can understand what this balance is and what it should be. Because there are definitely things that a lot of kids have which, if you don't incorporate into your adult life, you're gonna end up losing out. It's a thing which feeds into the staleness that I talked about, because it's more like the old versus the new. The old decays, gets stale, and it's the new is what brings in the fresh ideas, the fresh new details, so it can be ready for the present kind of scenario. I've mentioned one of these ideas when I did the episode on Jordan Peterson's first chapter of Beyond Order. So when you have that kid that's always looking for the new, that kind of spirit, it's also like comes with wonder to it. Like you've seen little kids when they see something new for the first time, how excited they get, how much passion is in there, and how ready they are to push themselves into that kind of new thing. That is something which people tend to lose as they age up, and just because we get used to those routines. And it's that spirit which we do need to carry on forward so that so that we can continue making the current moments at the best that it can be. I've mentioned this for relationships. You need to work on keeping that love there. If you don't work on it, if you don't add new, if you don't evolve it as time goes on, the fire's going to fade. Think about it for corporations. If they have the old guard, the ones who've been there forever, doing their kind of thing, new blood, and we talk about for like sports too, is what might get the whole system running even better than it ever has before. Because, that new kind of energy might bring in something which is exactly what that situation needed to maximize its potential. Asking questions, that's another big thing. Remember little kids, they're asking questions all the time. that, and sometimes we get annoyed about that. Sometimes we don't want to answer all those questions, and we don't have the answers. But the thing about it, they're always looking for a reason why, a reason for the things being the way they are, and whether or not they can be changed, manipulated to something else. So that's reiterating kind of the same kind of feeling again. But here's some more good things about that need to be reeled in for kind of the adult type side of it, being the mature part. A good thing is more like the awareness of the situation, the experience of how to handle people. Because, well, you also know little kids, and even older kids too, and sometimes people my age, you don't know how to read the situation, never kind of experience what to do with that before. I'll actually do a story with this, because I've been close friends to a lot of people, and a lot of people open up to me, but one time, which has kind of completely caught me off guard, is, so this is the first time I had a good friend who suffered from anxiety, like really bad anxiety, and I had never seen an anxiety attack before. And I usually have my ways to calm people down, get them adjusted so that they can breathe and let me know what's up. But this was different. This was something I didn't have a way to kind of help. I just kind of had to be there with them while they're going through that, and it pained me to not know how I could help her the best that I could. And that's simply a thing that comes with experience, knowing how to actually handle something when the situation comes up. And that's something that only comes with age, and because more opportunities more and more show up. And also repeatedly trying to do the same thing, that repetition is what will allow for essentially allow for that experience to develop. The another great thing that comes from being an adult and why you want one around is composure, maturity. Because when you're young and inexperienced, you don't know what to do, and a lot of different scenarios like that, you can be overwhelmed. Even though you come up with all these new ideas, if too much stimulus comes up that you've never dealt with before, and you don't have a way to handle them, it tends to crush certain people. I actually think the best example I have of for this stuff that I've said before has been with relationships and firsts. How firsts are always the worst because those emotions are new, you've never dealt with them before, and they become a lot more painful because of it. So experience and being the adult allows for that maturity, so even when things are in that kind of dire strait, you can remain calm and lead people. You're the one who can protect and take care of them, and that's a really big important thing. Here's one example, one story, and well, it's not pleasant. It's not the most pleasant for me. So in sophomore year of of college, I had to drive for one of our trips for geology, and I was in charge of the freshmen in my car, freshmen, juniors, assorted bunch, all assorted 18 to 20 somethings, and about like 6 of us in a van. And so when we got to our destination, one of them slammed the door shut on my index and middle finger, my right hand, and it locked in place with my fingers in between the doors. And everyone started freaking out. They're like, eyes widened, paralyzed, didn't know what to do. And me, the one in pain, I didn't yell. It kind of just happened. I was wincing. I took a deep breath, tried to remain calm. And then at first I tried to open the door from my side, maybe loosen it up a bit. And it made it tighter, more painful. So I stopped that. And then calmly and in pain, I asked one of them, can you go inside the car from the other side and open the door from there? And they didn't even know what to do. They didn't even hear me. And then I had to ask again, and then they're like, okay, I'll go do that. And they're freaking out because they've never encountered that situation. So only when you have that kind of experience and confidence that comes with that kind of maturity can you start really being able to handle situations in ways that the inexperienced don't have. But the problem with that is why you need to have the kiddish aspect of it too, is you can get too set in your ways. because you know what, there may be an issue there. So if you can reinforce that with, hey, I'm going to keep making this better every single time, then you're setting yourself up to be in that perfect balance where you can really address every situation and slowly build up that experience and maturity, which allows you to handle things in ways which someone who's a newbie can't really do. And I guess it's less to do with maybe physical age. Yeah, definitely physical age. But it's definitely a mentality of the unknown versus the known, and being in that balance so that you can handle things as they should be, and always make something better. But this is just one aspect for balance, because there are many other things which we can talk about which go along with this theme, how sometimes too much of something goes wrong, and you need just the right amounts of both to go and do things the way so they can go right. And we'll continue this on in the next segment, and I'll see you all soon.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hello and welcome back to this segment of the Life and Happiness podcast run by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Steven Solorzano, and let's get back into this subject matter. So today we're talking about how everything is a balance. Everything in life ends up being a balance between, going too far to one side or another, because typically going all in on a certain thing kind of, ends in not pleasant kind of things. And first I demonstrate it with the balance between having the kind of spirit of a kid versus the balance of having the spirit of an adult, and how you need to kind of mix the two so you don't go bad in either of the ways where kids go bad, which is they usually don't know enough to handle situation, and that inexperience gets to them. And also for how adults tend to go wrong is because they're so used to the routine that they built with that experience, they don't know how to revitalize something, and things get stale and corrupt themselves. But there are many other aspects of this. So I'm going to go demonstrate it again with reason and faith. Because whether or not you like it, everyone is religious in some manner. And the way I'm defining religious is that you take a leap of faith. Everyone has that. Because, for example, atheists, they're taking a leap of faith that there is nothing out there, nothing beyond us. And that's what, but the thing is, you can't prove that. Just as you can't prove that there is something out there. There's that line which reason can never fully comprehend. And it's even present in things like physics. For example, I'm pretty sure it's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which essentially means you can never know all the information you would want about particles, about the smallest bits of matter. You either know some of certain things or some of other things, but the more you learn about something, the more you lose information somewhere else. And that's partly with you can also kind of see that with some more quantum physics stuff, where it's like essentially everything is on a random chance kind of wavelength, and unless you're observing something, it could be anywhere at those points at that time, and once you observe it, it will appear at one of those positions, with it most commonly appearing in a few, and also the chances of being anywhere else are incredibly low, but it's still possible for that to happen. Now, we do observe it and can measure that, but that's just an example of where reason alone can't be enough to eliminate faith. But then we all see examples of people either going horribly wrong into reason or horribly wrong into faith. Both ways. The faith one being easy to describe, because we all see movies and shows that describe cultists, the religious fanatics who justify horrible things in the name of their religion, of their god or gods, whatever it may be. But then you also have people that stick only to reason so far, to the point where... So, here's an interesting thing, which this relates to, and I need to mention this first, so I continue that thought, is that prove that murder is wrong. Definitively prove it. With no doubts, like as a scientist would. Show that is the truth. Because what you'll find when you try to just think about that for a second, we may feel that it's wrong. We may even strongly feel that it's wrong. But it cannot be proven. So, someone who sticks strictly to reason will tend to dispense any faith claims like that. Because ultimately, that one right there is also a faith claim of what is right and wrong is a faith claim. So, if you ever want to read someone like Dostoevsky or Nietzsche, who they describe this pretty well, in their own novels, I think Brothers Karamazov. No, that's not the one. Not Pride and Prejudice. What is it? It's I'll mention if it comes to mind. But basically, this staunch rationalistic atheist goes and commits a crime, a murder, and he justifies to himself that it's a good thing because it benefits everyone, including the person that he's murdering, who hates life, and he makes really strong arguments to himself using his reason. And the main crux of what he justifies is the only reason that we say it's wrong is because the morals which we have in his society at the time, so a Western society, so a biblical society, are just faith claims which there are no proof to. It's just something we've created. So, rationally, it's like if this benefits everyone around, so like a utilitarian type idea, it would be something I should do. And he does it. And a little story will go into other things, but that's the point. Like, he is able to use reason to justify certain acts. And if you ever want to read something like Paradise Lost, or just, let's see, what are more common type of things I could talk about? Let's see. Think Thanos, actually, from Infinity War. He reasoned why he should murder millions of lives across the universe because, well, he saw it as a resource game, and it's like to keep everyone doing well, and he just kill like half of them, and then they'll be fine. Which, so you'll have characters like that, and that's one you all will recognize. Thanos, that big guy, the big purple guy, who wanted to kill trillions of lives just because it would achieve his balance. So that's actually an interesting way he goes about balance. And so, if you go too far into reason, you'll end up having people that will justify things like that. But there's also the issue when people go simply into faith, they just will believe things without really reasoning it out, right? That's like at least a stigma that's held on people who are supposed to be religious fanatics, right? In reality, what you actually need is a balance between the two. Because there are rational arguments for faith-based things, which may not provide proof, but provide strong evidence for. And the reason why that's important is because that is the basis of what you believe. Everyone takes a leap of faith in for what we decide is right and wrong. And we all have different ways of going about it. So, for example, if you're Muslim, that would mean that you would take the Quran as word for word God's word, and Muhammad as his prophet. That's the faith claim. And the right and wrong is what God says is right and wrong. And the Muslim God is not the same God as a Judeo-Christian God. I've kind of mentioned this slightly in an earlier episode, just comparing Genesis 1 to, I think it's the Surah 1, the cow, for the Quran. And there are major differences just from the beginning. If you're Hindu, there's a lot of other faith claims in there. One is that having faith in the karmic system, and some more vaguer notions of what right and wrong is. I think it's the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths. And personally, I do disagree with some of the Four Noble Truths. But those would be your leap of faith to kind of jump into those kind of things. For Jews and Christians, it's taking faith in the Bible. For Jews specifically, in the Torah and Nevi'im and the writings. And for Christians, that as well, on top of Jesus Christ as being the God embodied in human form and having died and resurrected on that day, being Easter, which actually just passed. So happy Easter to you all. So those are the faith claims which they are accepting in order to be their justification for their worldview. And those are stronger foundations than I would say, which is most common nowadays. What I think is people kind of just assume that there is, and vaguely that there is a right and wrong, and it's based on what their feelings are, and it's just kind of a general more confusion about it. Because the reason why I'm highlighting this as important is if someone, let's say I think something is true because I feel a certain way, but I can't argue for it. That means when someone attacks that point of view, attacks that worldview, it could collapse everything I believe if that's a fundamental basis. It's just, well, you don't know how to defend yourself. You can't really stand your ground against the truth, which, again, is the biggest cudgel, I would say, against any of these types of faith claims. Because the reason why we use reason in the first place is so we can figure out the truth. We can figure out what's wrong and when there's not believing things blindly. But reason can be used, and reason is used, in understanding faith claims more and why certain faith claims are stronger or weaker than others. And reason ultimately isn't enough to give that basis, because if you go purely reason, then any action is justified because there are no morals, because you can't prove that morals are real. So if you purely go by reason and exclude faith completely, then you have people who justify horrible things. And a big example of this is communism. A big reason why they justified murdering those 80 million people across those all assorted countries, Soviet Union, Communist China, and in Indonesia, I'm pretty sure, with Pol Pot, is that because it's a primary assertion of communism that there is no God, that there is no moral system. And the reason why is because that then allows them to justify everything else they want to do. Because even in the Communist Manifesto, Marx is calling directly for violence. It wasn't a thing that Lenin brought up. It wasn't a thing that Stalin brought up. But because they used their reason to the point where they understood that if there is nothing out there, that there's only this matter, that there is only things you can touch, feel, smell, all that, then there really is no right and wrong. Because, you die and you're done. There's no afterlife. There's no judgment, right? So long as you don't get punished for what you do in this world, you can get away with a lot of things, especially if you can convince people to allow you to do such things. So if you ever, this is kind of dark, but if you're curious, I would recommend you look into something called a black mass, which is how communists would torture religious believers in their own societies and would essentially be asserting everything that I'm telling you and be using that to kind of break these people, at the very least to torture their minds. I highly recommend the Gulag Archipelago and the Black Book of Communism, also The Devil and Marx. Those are 3 good books which go into those kind of things and show what happens in places that strictly abandon faith and only use reason, and also understand what that means. You get rid of the system which enforces morality, whether it exists or not. Then people are more likely to do all those bad things. Just think about it. If you know for sure you're not going to be punished for something, would you do it? And that's just more of a general thing. There's a lot of things that, if you know that nothing bad is going to happen, you can easily get away with it. Like, let's say you had a button which would put $1 million in your bank account. And the way the button worked is that it would take money from other people and funnel it all to you, but it was done in a way so that's undetectable, and that and you wouldn't even get to know who those people are. It's random, but all the money comes to you and you won't get caught. Would you press that button if you know you wouldn't get caught by the police, by the law, by the government, and any form of government? Would you do it? And I know a lot of people would. And the thing is, when it comes to religious believers, it's not just this. It's God is watching everything I do, at least if you're doing Muslim or Jewish or Christian. God is watching what I do, so he'll know that I'm stealing from people. And God says stealing is wrong. So I'd be sinning by doing that, and I'll be held accountable to it in the future. And that's part of that belief, and which reinforces that specific thing. But it requires faith. And if you eliminate that completely, then you lose a lot. Really, you do lose a lot. You have to accept that values are arbitrary, and you can't shoehorn them in because you have no way to shoehorn them in. There's nothing in the laws of physics or chemistry or biology would be able to account for why we shouldn't commit adultery, why we shouldn't steal or lie. That's just more like telling there's no fundamental base for that. It's more like I'm telling you that it's wrong because it's wrong, and that's an argument from, by definition, you can't really. Well, it's more like a circular argument, and it doesn't hold strong against other type of things. So those are examples of why reason and faith need to be held in balance. Going one way or the other tends to steer wrong. And we'll continue with more examples of this kind of balance type thing in the next segment. And I'll see you all soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello and welcome back to the Life and Happiness Podcast for the third segment of today's episode. Remember, we're run by the GSMC Podcast Network. Make sure to check out all the other shows. So yeah, let's get back into this stuff. And don't forget, the last segment is be 7 reasons to keep the kid inside of you alive. And let's get back into this. So, we've been talking all episode about balance. First thing contrasted is balance between having the spirit of a kid versus the spirit of the adult. And then, next one being balance between reason, balance between faith. And here's another one that I think is rather big. Having balance in between when the emotional side is necessary and when kind of being more serious and rational is needed. How's the best way I can illustrate this? So, there's this person that I was very close to a while ago, and she is very, how to put it, has high expectations of herself and knows what she's capable of and knows what she should be producing. And through school stuff, one of our semesters, she did rather, to put it accurately, horribly. Except it caught her off guard. She didn't expect that it would be that low. And in that specific scenario, it overwhelmed her and she was freaking out. All the other friends, all our other friends were essentially saying, it's okay, you'll be fine, you'll just do it next time, you're smart enough, you're not like all this kind of like emotional word type stuff. And it wasn't helping her. I wasn't with her for most of the day, so I didn't know she was going through all that till like near the end of the day. And she comes to me, and I can see what her other friends is trying, and it's like, "Hey, Steven, go help her out." And I took a look. Okay, what's wrong? Like, tell me straight up what's wrong. And what she needed at the time was not for someone to be emotional support. She wanted to like figure out why things had gone so badly. So she started telling me the little things, the specific assignments, some things that were late, some things that didn't get graded, like all this kind of stuff. And we went class by class, and she just needed, right in that specific scenario, she needed someone to be there to help comprehend everything which happened. So the seriousness of it was necessary. And her being able to rationalize the stuff that happened, why things went wrong the way that they did, that started to calm her down. That started to get her breathing to normalize. And really then kind of accept what happened, because it was her fault. In that specific story, it was her fault. But it also wasn't cold. It's like, in that specific situation, you're there for support. But you gotta be serious. Like, why did things go bad? And that's what she needed at the time. But then there are also scenarios where that's simply not the truth. Sometimes someone just needs to vent and let their emotions get out. They need just kind of the words and support to get there. And I have another friend, and he's like that. The way I would put it, whenever he's going through an issue, it's like, it doesn't matter the rationality of what I say. It doesn't matter if I say the right things and, like, what's the solution. He just wants to have someone there that he can vent to, get his emotions out. And that's what's needed in that specific scenario. That's what gets him to calm down. That's what gets him to kind of adjust and be able to handle that situation better. But think about it when, like, you're kind of just meeting people. It's also, depending on who you're with, you need to adjust the balance between how emotional, how kind of excited you are versus how kind of more professional, mature you look. You kind of match people's energies, you know? Because some people, they open up more to someone who acts a little bit more vulnerable. They show a lot more of what they're thinking on their sleeve versus, think about it I'll put it this way. Like, let's say, how you know, when you go to a doctor, you want them to be that kind of serious professional, that type of look. They're the expert. They know what they're handling. You don't want them to be very emotional. You want them to, hey, maybe they'll lighten the mood with a joke, but you want them to really know and understand what your situation is and help you out, right? Versus, let's say, well, the reason why I'm kind of struggling for an example is because, well, people don't like hanging around super emotional people. They're intense. They're very intense. They're hard to be around. But sometimes they're awesome, you know? But sometimes just a little much, and it's not for everyone. Think about it like the extrovert-introvert type of difference. That's another thing which should be in balance. You know, you got to be able to go outside, interact with people, but it's also nice to be able to be okay and be by yourself. You know, be able to go out and eat by yourself, or just have that kind of peace, you know, because you're not always able to go out with everyone. But do that emotional kind of thing. It is important sometimes, especially with someone that you're close to, that you can recognize their emotional vulnerability. And especially in relationships. One thing that I've been described to by a lot of girls about what they feel is they get really happy when their man actually opens up about his emotions. Because you guys know the typical thing, the machismo type stuff, the stoic type stuff, or part of being able to handle all these situations of this pressure where we have to be a protector, a provider type things, is that the composure stays there. And the thing is, a lot of the time that ends up to being it's easier to keep the emotions in than it is to control them on the outside. And part of what happens when you're being taught all those things, you don't learn to actually kind of let those parts of you out for the world to see. They're more inward type of thing, and I definitely can recognize stuff like that with the men I've known in my own life. So that balance needs to come in with understanding when and how to approach someone for that emotional vulnerability. It's like, you know, we always feel these certain things inside of us, these feelings, these emotions, and sometimes they're really powerful. But those feelings and emotions can ruin a situation, make it less comfortable, make it so that people see you a little bit more as unstable, untrustworthy. But those emotions also get to you. They affect us in negative ways a lot of the time, and sometimes in positive ways too. And you have to learn when it's okay to let those things out so you can acknowledge them first off and next understand them. Because they are, well, they're not easy to understand. Why do you think people go to therapy? It's like humans are complicated for so many reasons, but that emotional type part of us is, well, it's a handful. This reminds me of a joke one person said, where it's like, one reason why he thinks girls are a little bit more complicated is how much more emotional they are than guys, first off. How much thoughts are kind of more constantly kind of running in and don't stop, whereas guys will tend to be a lot more simple in that kind of respect. So he jokes that if you ever switched the brains between like a husband and a wife, the wife would be like, oh my god, it's relief, it's so easy. And he's joking that guys probably commit suicide with all the thoughts. Because we never have those we don't have those things as often, so. Anyways. So that's that. That was that kind of thing. It's an interesting balance to kind of strike. Because you want people to be able to trust you and be able to understand, have that stability there. That's what that professionalism, type heroic type look is. You keep the image of someone who is stable. But emotions, the reason why emotions are looked at as untrustworthy is because emotions show our vulnerabilities. That's what the balance is. It's showing when to show you those vulnerabilities. Because there's some areas where if you show them off to the world, it's really unprofessional. People don't want to be around you. People won't trust you. And also others where it's where that stoicism is just closes you off from people. So it's another one of those things like in the prior episode where it's like when you don't know someone that well, you want to show that strength, you want to show that maturity, that composure, But when you're getting closer to someone, if you don't show them the vulnerabilities every once in a while, then it becomes really hard to bond with that person, because everyone will end up showing at some point. And if it's one-sided, then a lot of people doubt whether or not they could trust it. And it depends on the situation too, because sometimes emotions are necessary, sometimes they're not. But that, again, with this whole theme of balance, that's what it kind of comes to be. And this balance stuff applies to everything. It's good to have a little bit of greed to motivate you to work, but, not so much greed that you're stealing from people. It's good to feel anger, because that shows you, that's your recognition that you can, when something is wrong, that you're willing to stand up against it. But if you're always angry, then you're just hurting people. It's good to have shyness and caution for new situations. That way you get used to them. You can see the dangers more clearly instead of just running blindly through. But too much shyness, too much caution will be that you're not going to do anything. I can keep going with this kind of stuff. Let's see, too much care for someone ends up being smothering, think about that image where it's the mother that won't let their kids do anything. And that's just too much for the child. Too much motivation, too much kind of pushing from other people gets people tired. It gets them upset. They're like, dude, shut up. I definitely experienced that when I was captain of Oli, because certain people I knew, if I pushed them a little too much, then it'd be like, God, Steven, shut up. But it is important to have that energy there. But you gotta know the balance with that, right? And here's another thing with teamwork. It's good to be able to be responsible. It's good to be able to do things. But you need to be able to balance it out with leaving some responsibility for other people to do. Working with them so you can create a larger whole. That's another one of my own flaws. I get the tendency of wanting to do everything on my own. When in reality, when I work with others, I should work on splitting that responsibility up, letting them feel part of the team. So then that builds that whole morale all together. And it just keeps going on and on to the types of things which this works with. You can't have too much chaos, but you can't have too much order. The only thing which I can think of which is kind of like this, which is kind of not like this, what I mean, is like the thing you probably want the least of is with good and evil. You want to stay as far away from evil as possible, and you want to enjoy the good. I think that's the ideal. You don't wish people to encounter those kinds of things, but I don't think life gives that to you. Even though the one thing that we would want to be all one way and not the other, life just throws good and evil at you. So you have to be able to deal with them. But that's the only thing I can think of, which is one that you only want to one side. If things can be steered to the good, you want the good side of it. You don't want the bad version of it, because we've all dealt with those horrible type of things. When things go wrong, sometimes when people are malicious. And then, you know what? Sometimes life is just kind of brutal. And we can't avoid it. I was trying to think if there's any other way to word it, like maybe we only want pleasure and no pain. But the thing is, a lot of things which are good involve suffering. You have to work hard for your dreams to come true. It's not going to be easy. So, yeah, I think almost everything applies to this, where you need a balance of both extremes, except for good and evil. You need understanding of evil, but you would want to experience just the good, hopefully. At least I wouldn't wish the worst on anyone, and including myself. That's right. Next segment, we'll go into the 7 reasons why you should keep that kid part of you alive. Emphasize that part of the balance. And yeah, I really hope you guys have enjoyed this conversation so far. Leave comment below. I want to hear what you guys' thoughts are. And I'll see you all in the next segment.
the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the final segment of today's episode of the Life and Happiness Podcast, run by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Steven Solorzano, and let's finish up today's topic. So what have you been doing all day? We've been discussing about how balance is an incredibly important thing to life. First, we talked about the balance between being a kid and adult. 2, being the balance between reason and faith. And 3, well, kind of showing it all over the place. So, for example, emotions versus rationality. That's a big one. Another one being kind of like greed versus altruism type stuff. Basically, you need enough greed to be able to motivate you to actually go kind of earn what you want to do. Like, a big reason why capitalism works is to get stuff that you want, you need to produce something that others people want, because under ideal form of capitalism, under free market enterprise, everything is free exchange. People only enter a contract with you, enter a trade with you, if they want to do so. So you have to provide for others, so long as the rules are fair. Anyways, so that was one illustration of it. Others being, let's see, what are the ones that I came up with? We talk about a little bit. Oh yeah, aggression versus agreeability. You need both of those, and a good balance to understand which situations apply the right need of it, and how if you go any too much into one of these directions, it could go wrong, and sometimes very wrong. And so this final segment, I kind of want to touch back on the idea that we had in the first segment. I think it's very important to kind of keep the childlike wonder of life alive, and these are my 7 reasons as to why that's an important thing. And number 1 is you're always asking questions. I've mentioned this before, but that's the biggest thing, because kids, they're always asking questions. They don't know enough about the world. They haven't really identified the right way to look at things. So they're always trying to figure things out, always trying to understand new things. And the thing about life is, well, if you want to succeed, you got to keep learning, you got to keep growing. That's also what makes it interesting. And also, well, all the seniors that, well, they struggle to work with all the tech, and the whole world is kind of moving in that direction. So if they want to succeed in kind of business or wherever, or if they want to look for continue a career, you have to be able to integrate all these new technologies. That's what keeps businesses at the forefront of what they can do, because they're always incorporating new blood, always getting these new fresh ideas, to working them into a system that works. And if you notice, there's like one of the stereotypes we have on older people is like they know everything, even though some things they may say are wrong. And to be fair, some kids do that too, and that's where they go wrong too. That's when they're getting too prideful. So it's important to have that little childlike humility, so you can keep figuring out whether or not something is right or not. Keep getting better, keep improving, bring in that fresh new life, which some old systems definitely need. Number 2 is the innocence of it. It's like the way I've thought about like certain parts of the adult world, especially when it comes to business and the sales stuff that I do. It's the fact that everyone has an agenda. Everyone has something that they want from you. And it's like this suspicion of every little person around you, which is important. It's necessary. But one thing that's wonderful about kids is the innocence to what they do. And because they haven't felt the full brunt of life in most cases, that makes people more jaded as they age up. They look at things with this sweet little wonder of the possibilities that they could be. They look at things from a positive angle because they have no reason to look at it from the negative angle. They want to see things. They want to look at the world and see heroes. They want to look at the world and see wonders. And that comes from that innocence, and that it's fed in by the questioning, always looking for more, but the wonder of what that could be from kids. Like, why do you think we have all these movies and stories where it's the kids that are actually the one that go and save all this stuff, and it's the older folk that have to kind of rest up, that are the support? Because there's something different, something innocent in that childlike spirit, which a lot of people end up leaving behind. And you notice it a lot in customer service and sales type stuff, and you look at those people and they're a little bit dead inside, like I've mentioned before. Like, their soul, the spirit in their eyes is gone. And that's something which should be kept. And then, let's see. Number 3, it's almost like the mischievous aspect of it. Because, kids are always trying to get the way which benefits them. That kind of playful kind of stuff. That's more so, the reason why I think that's a good thing, it's kind of like the morale aspect of it, which kind of keeps everyone happy, engaged as a part of whatever system. Because you think about it, like when you're in a team and the fire kind of dies, or you guys are kind of just going through emotions, no one's motivated to go do things, and the production slows down, and it's not necessarily the best environment. It's when you have that kind of, playful attitude with one another that a lot of kids have, is that it motivates the team, whatever it is, or group, around that one goal, and they get that kind of spirit going. And it's what pushes people out of their boundaries. It's what gets people to do the new, and the better. And that's another childlike spirit thing, which, it's, because the energy which I'm talking about. You know how excited they get for stuff, and that is just that natural energy which is there. And here's something which I was told today. I have someone from work, which I thought was actually a really interesting idea, and I think it applies to this very well. The way you live when you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s starts when you're here in your 20s, like I am. So if you keep that youthful exuberance now, it'll stay with you all the way back then. And similarly, I know plenty of people my age who act dead inside, and those are the people who become those seniors who we see who are dead inside, and are close on the other way too, where their spirit's gone and they get bitter and resentful about all these things. And it's largely because they've given up on that spirit, on that belief that things can always get better. And that's something I think comes with that naive, childlike innocent and wonder that we have with the world. Number 4, I think it opens up your relationships more. And this is broad, like friendship to parents, to all that kind of stuff. Because I've described this before, that kids have, when they're young, they have nothing but devotion to their parents. And also, if they have siblings, it's to their older siblings. It's like that idea, described, never meet your heroes, because when you meet them, they'll disappoint you. But kids, it's like, for those people then, when they're seeing the best in them, they look at their parents as wonderful heroes. And it's the age and experience which corrupts that point of view a lot of the time. The reason why I think that's important, it's because when for those children, they're looking at people and they're seeing the best of them. And even if they recognize the bad's there, it's the good that they're focusing on and emphasizing. And I think that's a great way to treat people when you meet them for the first time. To have that actual curiosity of what they're like and to latch onto the amazing parts there and make sure you bring that out. And in doing so, you're forced to kind of bring out the same part of you forward. And that basically, it puts you in a way to act heroic, act virtuous. Bring that honest side of yourself out forward to someone. Because kids do that. Like, okay, we know kids lie. And they do all those horrible things. But because of that innocence, because of that honesty with who they are, because when you're that little, you don't have bad intentions yet. You may be doing things which are wrong, but it's not like you were being malicious about it. And it's that spirit which allows people to trust one another more, build strong communities. Like, imagine being able to do that with like 10, 20 people, and those are people you hang out with on a regular basis, and what that kind of feels like. That's an amazing thing, really, to have. So then, number 6, I think doing this, keeping the kid inside of you alive, helps you identify more with younger people. So as you age, you can have a better relationship with your own children, or just your nephews, nieces, grandchildren, all that kind of stuff. And remembering what it was like to be at that time can help you identify with them more and attend to them in the way which is necessary. Be a mentor. That kind of thing. And I do think it's really beneficial to do that because you get to see your hard work and effort as they grow and evolve, and become the people who you saw that they could be. And with that childlike innocence that you look at them, that you see things not just for what they are, but you see every possibility there within too, and that those possibilities can be brought into this world. And the final thing, number 7, it makes you happier. That's the fundamental thing. These are things. Keeping that spirit alive makes you less bitter. It makes you less resentful. It pushes back against all of those things, because for the most part, kids aren't that way. They learn to become resentful. They learn to become angry, hateful, all this stuff. That's not how they are naturally. Yes, they have those emotions in there, but that's not their demeanor. That's not their personality. You don't learn to become dour until you've been dealt that bad hand, and then you've given into those parts of you. So keeping that right attitude, that humility and honesty of being that child, alongside the maturity that comes with our age and experience, will keep everything. It's the bulwark against which we can fight against the pressures of real day everyday life. Actually, here's an interesting story. I thought this was awesome. There's this married couple, and when the husband came home one time, all he found was a note on the front door and a package, and the note was from his wife, and it's like and the package was a Nerf gun with some bullets in it too, and the note said, "I'm inside. I have my Nerf gun ready. First one to get shot makes dinner tonight." And it's just a little playful thing, and it just kind of, I don't know, gives some type of energy to that kind of environment to come home. Think about The Incredibles, the scene when it's like when Mr. Incredible starts living out more who he wants to be, and he has that kind of childlike excitement in again, and he brings that to his home, and you can see how much more passionate he is with his wife and his kids in the story. And Pixar did a great job animating that sequence, but that's what kind of showing what that kind of little innocent spirit is like, and how much it can do for ourselves and our own families. And it's just something worth preserving. Like, I always thought, like, why would you ever want to let that feeling die? Why would you ever want to let things get mundane? Why wouldn't you want to have that energy and passion all the time? And I guess little me thought I would want to do everything I could to keep that for as long as I could. But yeah, I think that's everywhere I can go with that idea. I wonder what all your thoughts are. Comment below and join the conversation. Really, I'd love to have your thoughts, so we can develop these even further into something even more real than what I've done so far. If you've liked the content so far, give us a like. A share is incredibly important. That'd be wonderful. You could share it with as many people as possible, so then we can keep spreading these ideas out with more and more people. If you don't forget to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And I think that was all that. So check out the rest of the shows to the GMC Podcast Network. Check out Jordan's episodes. And this is Steven signing off.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find the show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast.